I'd just like to quickly mention at the start of this video that I'm now on Patreon, where from $2 a month you can help support me create more content along the lines of this video. Your support will be greatly appreciated. To find out more, why not follow the links in the video description today and find out what exclusive perks you can receive. Hey there, I hope you are well. I'm back with a new game review, and in this video I'll be looking at a game that remains at the top of my all-time favourites, if not my all-time favourite, Rainbow Islands. I'm also delighted that I was able to talk to Andrew Braybrook, the legendary coder behind the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST ports, and I'll be sharing some of his words and memories with you of bringing one of the best 16-bit home computer games of all time. Before we begin, we need to talk about Bubble Bobble. Rainbow Islands creator Mitsuji Fukio-san had noticed a lack of women visiting arcades in the 1980s in Japan, and so wanted to create a game that would help bring in all to the arcades. The cute or kawaii aesthetic deployed in Bubble Bobble was no accident and a result of trying to involve an unrepresented demographic in gaming. Mitsuji-san created hundreds of notes of his ideas, which resulted in a solid game that Bubble Bobble is, and majored on cooperative two-player gameplay. It was therefore beyond doubt that Bubble Bobble's successor would take this series forward. Bubble Bobble was released in September of 1986 to a rave reception in Japan. The sequel, Rainbow Islands, was released into arcades in 1987, and it was a smash hit. Its full title was Rainbow Islands, the story of Bubble Bobble 2. Mitsuji-san wanted to create a sequel that employed new gameplay mechanics and new design in order to move the gameplay forwards, but retain the draw of cute styling, secrets and two-player gameplay. The game features the main protagonists, Bub and Bob, who at the end of Bubble Bobble were restored to human form in the true ending, but unlike the original, the cooperative gameplay revolved around each player taking turns. This didn't the success of the game, and it soon spawned an impressive list of ports to home systems over the coming years. It is a vertically scrolling platform game that is packed with secrets and hidden endings and much more. The main mechanic revolves around platforming with the help of rainbows and collecting coloured gems. It has a smooth difficulty curve that, unlike many arcade games of the time, didn't punish the player needlessly. Combinations of pickups will improve the player's abilities, from being able to release star projectiles when jumping to invincibility and so much more. So in this video I will cover 3 versions, all recorded from original hardware: the Commodore 64, the PC Engine and finally the Amiga version. I'd hoped to include the arcade version that featured on the PlayStation 2 compilation Taito Legends, but sadly ran out of time to record the footage before moving to Japan, and I haven't brought the PS2 or said game with me. So let's turn to the Commodore 64 version, and Rainbow Islands is a game that, unlike so many, didn't really suffer a bad port on any of the systems that it appeared on. Developed at Graftgold alongside the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, ST and ZX Spectrum versions, it is a great version. Programmed by Gary Foreman with graphics by John Cumming and music by Jason Page, it's just a superb game for the system. The graphics remain colourful throughout the game, with a great smooth gameplay. It is this that is something of a hallmark on the C64 on well-coded games. A game like Rainbow Islands really pushes the colour palette envelope, but from the very start, with a beautifully drawn splash screen, you know you're in for a treat and know that a good job has been done. Of course, to employ the level of colour required in the graphics, this requires the classic C64 chunky multicolour pixels, but at no point do I find this distracting. It's great that the graphics have been somewhat rescaled to make use of the C64's vertical resolution, as a game like Rainbow Islands could soon get cramped, and it certainly helps the gameplay. As with most home computer ports making use of one-button controllers, up is for jump. That said, this has never been a problem for me, as I've been able to platform with relative ease using an authentic zipstick on my Commodore 64. Sadly, as I'll reveal when talking about the Amiga version, the 3 secret islands as found on the arcade original and with some other ports are not present, but what you do have here are 7 worlds of pure gameplay fun. Some may say the mechanic gets a little bit repetitive, but I've never found this myself, and when playing Rainbow Islands, I've found the difficulty curve keeps me invested in the game throughout. Finally, the sound design is well done, featuring the Over the Rainbow theme, which will play in your head for hours and days after putting it down. It is genuinely one of the best arcade ports on the Commodore 64, and for me, a must play and a must own. Next is the PC Engine version, released on the Super CD-ROM ROM format in late 1993, so somewhat late into the console's lifespan. If there was ever a game that I'd love to have in HuCard format for the PC Engine, this would be it, but that will never happen. Until I'd played the PC Engine version last year, I was fairly convinced that nothing could really top the Amiga home port for me, and whilst you'll find out that I think the Amiga version is outstanding, this port pips it in just a few ways that makes it the best version for me. The first is a save game feature, which for a game as long as Rainbow Islands can be, in my adult life I find this something that I appreciate, as it means that I can play for say 30-minute bursts and then pause until I have time to return to the game. You also have an easy difficulty setting, which for those who enjoy the game but found the gameplay a little bit on the tough side and unforgiving, this can be a great help in getting you into enjoying the game. In addition to these nice perks, the game runs at a stable 60 frames per second, something that until you play this port of the game, you don't appreciate the difference between this and say the Amiga port, which in itself is very fluid, but again, I'll talk about that in the Amiga port. Finally, and perhaps the most important note, is that you have all of the secrets and extra islands present in this port, something you'll lack on the C64 and Amiga versions. And it's always great to have some extra Rainbow Islands to enjoy in life. What I really appreciate on the PC Engine version is the support for 2-button controls, which when you have played the 1-button Amiga and C64 ports, this is definitely something that makes the game a little bit easier to play, so that you can just have a separate button for jump and one for firing your rainbows. Overall, if you want to play Rainbow Islands on an 8 or 16-bit system, I'd say that the PC Engine version is a definitive version, if only for its inclusion of all the game's secrets and therefore islands. And so to the Amiga version, which I can say right now is one of the best games for the system, consistently rated as one of the top games by the press, and even stating some of the most demanding reviews at the famed Amiga Power magazine. There are precious few arcade ports to Amiga that still hold up to today when compared to some of the ports that appeared on the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo in the same era, but this is one of them, and I'm delighted that I got to talk to Andrew Braybrook, who was the coder for the Atari ST and Commodore Amiga versions. Rainbow Islands for the Amiga was also developed at Graftgold and released in 1990 after Ocean renegotiated the rights with Taito after Firebird sold to Microprose in 1989. In 1990, the game was even included in the Flight of Fantasy Amiga 500 pack in the UK by Commodore. It remained on the shelves for many years after release, spawning budget releases, and it remains alongside Buggy Boy, one of the first games that I enjoyed on Amiga, and still do to this day. I asked Andrew Braybrook, programmer of the Amiga and ST ports, about his involvement in the emerging games industry in the UK in the 1980s. I asked Andrew how he got into the games industry. My dad took me to a careers evening at his firm where they were looking for IT people. I got 2 interviews, passed them both. I chose to go to GAC Marconi. This was 1979. Arcade games were just arriving in the pubs and I was allowed in. Friday evening was games night. Even the last stop chip shop had an Asteroids machine. It was when some of my colleagues showed me some of Jeff Minter's games on C64 I started thinking about writing games. So how did Andrew move on from Marconi to making games? I was also playing bass guitar in a band where our lead guitarist Steve Ralling worked with another lead guitarist Steve Turner, who later joined our band too. In 1983 he took the brave step of packing in his IT job to write a ZX Spectrum game, 3D Space Wars. He got the game published and was making money at it, but was bored at working at home on his own. In September he offered me a job writing games with him. Taking a job was a relatively small risk. Sometimes you just have to follow your nose. I asked about the 16-bit home computer scene and what Andrew thought of the Atari ST and Commodore Amiga when he first saw them. Jeff Minter invited us to his house to show us his Atari ST Color Space Light synth. He had a new Amiga 1000 and showed us some of the early games, including Marble Madness. It was such a step up from the limited colours of 8-bit computers, and a big leap closer to arcade game quality. I bought an A1000 shortly after, so I could start experimenting with graphics and using Deluxe Paint. Moving on to Andrew's time at Graftgold, working on the conversion of Rainbow Islands, I asked him what his fondest memories of the time were. We had a folder of design information from Taito, no actual code, but a lot of graphics sheets, which gave us a good head start. We also had the arcade machine, so we could also get some good practice at the game. David O'Connor, our Spectrum programmer, was an exceptional player at a lot of arcade games. We needed him to be able to complete the game whilst we had a video camera recording. That helped John Cumming to map all the levels accurately. Dominic was also working on the game operating system on the ST and being very clever with figuring out how to get the best out of the ST. Gary J. Foreman was coding the C64 version, David was coding the Spectrum version, and I was doing the 16-bit versions, ST first. I asked whether there were any surprises during the game's development that the team encountered. The biggest surprise though was that no one knew that it was a 10-island game. The map shows 7, and only when you complete level Island 7 properly do you see some more. Those last 3 islands are also huge. One has a much more ambitious colour palette, and we didn't get many, if any, graphics for the later levels. We agreed with the then publisher we would not be able to do 3 more islands in the same time span. It was already going to be tight on time. I programmed a secret island sequence. We had the graphics, but it had to come out to release the space in the half-meg machine. Asking whether there are any differences to the arcade version and the conversion Andrew worked on, he commented, "I managed to get one of the extra bonuses in there, the Graftgold key going to appear. If you collect it, it subtly changes the Monster Island background for subsequent games. The key might appear at any time, not until the player next goes to Monster Island would they see the effect. No one would even spot the connection." On his blog, Andrew mentions a 50 frames per second Amiga 1200 version that was used during the development of the later PlayStation, Saturn and PC ports of Rainbow Islands. I asked whether this still exists. I do have 2 interesting looking floppy disks that might just be the Holy Grail. Whether they still read or not, we don't know. I don't believe I'd done any AGA upgrades. The Amiga 1200 would have been able to do the job at 50 Hz with the extra CPU speed. Probably so would an accelerated ECS machine. And finally, do you play Rainbow Islands, I asked, and how do you rate your skills? I have the arcade machine with the board in it still, which helped me hone my skills, but it's not working now. I could usually get to Toy Island on the first life, maybe even Arkanoid Island. You can get to the secret rooms by, spoiler alert, collecting the small gems in colour sequence, red to violet. We always try to do that, which takes a bit of extra planning to get the gems within 4 levels, but the bonuses that offers help later on. I'm not sure I could ever get to the end. It gets really tough. Levels are huge, and they're the ones that you see the least, so don't get enough practice. Well, I have to say it's been a great pleasure to be able to ask Andrew about his involvement in the game, and I for one am grateful for his skills and talents that enabled such a fine port to happen. If you want to see the full interview, please pop along to my Patreon page with the link in the description of this video, where I've uploaded it for everybody to read, non-Patrons included. So back to the Amiga game in terms of the game itself, and there's very little to separate this from the arcade version, with colourful graphics and slick gameplay. Like the C64 version, it does lack the secret islands, but as explained by Andrew there is a reason for this. Things were different then. The two-player gameplay is still present, and like the C64, the one-button controls necessitate up for jump, but if you get the WHD download version, you'll find that the two-button control support is implemented. I would recommend that you try it out if you have a supporting controller, as it can really improve the gameplay. Just like the C64 version, the Over the Rainbow theme is back with this version, and even more catchy. Sometimes I found myself weeks after playing the game and realising the tune is running through my mind. It's super catchy. Overall, it's hard to pick a finer port to the Amiga in my book, and the fact this runs on standard 512k Amiga means that it tickles a part of me that is hugely impressed. If there's one thing common to all versions of Rainbow Islands that sometimes rattles people, is that once you're committed to a jump manoeuvre in a certain direction, you can't change that mid-flight. And I agree that this can be frustrating, and it certainly sharpens your skills though, learning how to anticipate enemy patterns. I have to say I'm mighty interested if Andrew ever finds out his two possible enhanced Amiga Rainbow Islands discs actually contain the Holy Grail. To be able to play this game full screen with the smoothest gameplay experience would be something all Amiga owners would love to do. I think that we can agree that Andrew and the entire Graftgold team's work on the various ports of Rainbow Islands did the arcade game proud. In summary, the hours I have played Rainbow Islands are a testament to the love I have for this game. I think that whatever system you play this on, you'll not be disappointed. As for the game's creator, Mitsuji-san, he later went on to form a game design school, saying his philosophy in life was that no one person can do everything, and that he preferred to be the planter of trees rather than be the tree himself. Tragically, he passed away in 2008 from cardiac arrest, but in Bubble Bobble's true ending, it carries a message with resonance to today. Now you have found the most important magic in the world. It's love and friendship. Mitsuji-san's outlook and philosophy shines through in both of these games, and I can't help but feel that some of his philosophy shines through in Rainbow Islands in spades. I guess that all remains for me to say is see you soon. Peace! So it's come to that part of the video where I mention that I'm on Patreon. From as little as $2 a month you can get early access to content, exclusive artwork through the post, your name mentioned on videos, as well as tips that I don't publish to the public. You can find a link in the video description below. Your subscription to my channel will also help me ensure that I can bring the latest content here from Japan.